Have you ever lain awake at night, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, wondering whether the way you phrased something came across the wrong way? Have you ever spent 20 minutes staring at a text message, reading it over and over, trying to decode what the other person really meant? Or made a completely ordinary decision, what to order, what to wear, whether to say yes or no, and somehow turned it into a 2-hour internal debate? If any of this sounds familiar, you are not dramatic. You are not broken. You are an overthinker. And there are far more of you than you might realize. Overthinking is one of the most quietly exhausting experiences a human being can carry. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not look like a crisis from the outside. It often looks like someone who is thoughtful, careful, responsible, maybe even composed. But on the inside, the mind is running at full speed. Analyzing, predicting, second-guessing, catastrophizing, and looping back around to start the entire process over again. The brain becomes both the judge and the defendant, endlessly litigating decisions that were already made, conversations that are already over, and futures that have not yet arrived. So why does this happen? Why do some people's minds refuse to simply let things go? The answer, more often than not, begins long before adulthood. Overthinking rarely emerges from nowhere. It is typically a learned response, a psychological coping mechanism that developed in childhood as a way to feel safe in an environment that felt uncertain or unpredictable. Children who grew up in households where love felt conditional, where mistakes were met with criticism rather than compassion, or where the emotional temperature of the home was constantly shifting, often learned that thinking ahead was a form of self-protection. If you could anticipate every possible outcome, you could prepare. If you could rehearse every conversation, maybe nothing would go wrong. If you could analyze every variable, perhaps you could avoid the pain of being caught off guard. This hypervigilant way of moving through the world became deeply wired into the nervous system. And while it may have served a real purpose in childhood, helping a young person navigate a home that required careful navigation, it follows that person into adulthood, long after the original threat has passed. The mind does not automatically know when it is safe to stop scanning. It simply keeps doing what it was trained to do. In adulthood, this manifests in ways that touch almost every area of life. In relationships, overthinkers often struggle with a quiet but relentless fear of saying the wrong thing, being misunderstood, or being rejected. They analyze their partner's tone of voice, the timing of a response, the exact words someone chose or did not choose. A friend who takes hours to respond to a message becomes a source of anxiety. A colleague who walks past without saying hello triggers a spiral of wondering what has been done wrong. This is not vanity or self-centeredness. It is a nervous system that learned to treat uncertainty as danger. In professional settings, overthinking can look like perfectionism. The overthinker rewrites the email 4 times. They lie awake before a meeting, rehearsing what they will say. They hesitate to share an idea because they have already imagined every possible way it could be dismissed. What looks like a lack of confidence from the outside is actually an internal storm of evaluation, a mind working overtime to prevent any outcome that might feel like failure or humiliation. And then there is the cruelest dimension of overthinking, the way it robs people of the present moment. While the overthinker is mentally living in 15 different possible futures or dissecting something that happened 2 weeks ago, life is continuing to unfold around them. They miss the joy of a moment because they are too busy wondering if it will last. They miss the warmth of a connection because they are analyzing whether it is real. There is a grief in this that is rarely spoken about. The grief of being alive in your own life, but somehow always slightly removed from it, watching from behind the glass of your own relentless mind. It is also important to understand what overthinking is not. It is not a sign of intelligence, though many overthinkers are deeply intelligent. It is not careful planning or wise deliberation. True problem solving has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Overthinking circles. It revisits. It never fully resolves. Research in cognitive psychology consistently distinguishes between productive reflection, where you analyze a situation to gain clarity and move forward, and rumination, where the mind turns the same thoughts over and over without arriving anywhere new. Rumination is associated with increased levels of anxiety, depression, and chronic stress. It is not a tool for finding answers. It is a symptom of a mind that does not yet feel safe enough to rest. The emotional core beneath overthinking is almost always some form of fear. Fear of making the wrong choice, fear of being rejected or humiliated, fear of losing control, fear of not being enough. These fears feel very real, and in many ways they are the emotional fingerprints of real past experiences. But the strategies the mind uses to manage those fears, the endless analysis, the catastrophic imagining, the circular loops of what if, do not actually dissolve the fear. They only feed it because every new round of thinking implies that there is still something to be afraid of. Understanding this is the beginning of something important, because once you recognize that your overthinking is not a character flaw but a protective response, one that made sense once and simply has not yet been updated, you can begin to relate to it differently. You do not have to fight your mind. You do not have to shame yourself for spiraling. You can instead gently notice what is happening and ask, what am I afraid of right now? What does this part of me need in order to feel safe? Healing from chronic overthinking is not about becoming someone who never thinks deeply. Depth of thought is a gift. It is about learning to distinguish between thinking that serves you and thinking that imprisons you. It is about building enough trust in yourself that you do not need to rehearse every scenario before stepping forward. It is about tolerating uncertainty, which is ultimately the condition of being alive without requiring your mind to solve it into nothingness before you can exhale. Practical pathways exist. Grounding techniques that bring the body back into the present moment can interrupt the thought spiral before it accelerates. Journaling allows the mind to externalize its loops and see them with more perspective. Therapy, particularly approaches rooted in cognitive behavioral and somatic frameworks, can help trace overthinking back to its origins and gently update the beliefs and nervous system responses that sustain it. And mindfulness, not as a performance of peace, but as a sincere practice of noticing, teaches the mind that it is possible to observe a thought without being consumed by it. Most importantly, the overthinker needs to hear this. The exhaustion you carry is real. The effort your mind puts in every single day, trying to keep you safe, trying to get everything right, trying to anticipate what comes next, that is a tremendous amount of labor. You have been working very hard for a very long time, and you deserve to rest. Not because everything is perfectly resolved, not because all the uncertainty has been eliminated, but because you are allowed to be here fully imperfectly presently here without earning it first. The mind that learned to overthink learned it for a reason, and with patience, compassion, and the right support, it can also learn something new. That stillness is not danger, that uncertainty is not catastrophe, and that you, exactly as you are right now, are already enough to handle whatever comes next.